to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to a preventative version of Security Guy Radio. My first version of the show should have been the preventative, and this should be the predictable.
It's always good to be preventative.
It is. Predictable is also good. So welcome back to...
predictably preventative?
Is there such a thing as predictably preventative? I believe there is.
By
Jove, I believe there is. Well, you British invented the language. You guys, I don't know.
Well, true. Well, British invented most of the things.
I know.
Well, the English, I should say.
The English. All right, welcome back to Security Guy Radio with our Part 2 show on prediction versus prevention in violence. And our special guest, John D. Byrnes, founder and CEO of the Center for Aggression Management. John, are you there?
I am.
Where are you calling from, by the way? Where are you calling in from?
Orlando, Florida, home of
Very
Mickey
nice.
Mouse.
Well, thanks for staying up so late with us. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
What's the weather like?
Well, it is, and also I should mention that I went through my formative years in England. I grew up in England.
Whereabouts?
So I understand that the language that I'm hearing off in the corner here from Paul.
Yeah.
Well,
so whereabouts were you?
I lived in London and St. John's Wood.
Very
I lived in
nice.
Cobham in Surrey, and I lived in Neatley in Hampshire.
Very nice.
Total of about 7 years.
Yeah, I only used to visit those areas when I had some money.
Well, I must say, I did detect a certain air of sophistication about
Yes.
Mr. Burns. Even though he has an Irish last name, he was still in jolly old England, though. That's interesting.
I thought that was
Yes,
Scottish.
yes, quite.
Isn't that Scottish, Burns?
Well, now let me mention once again, since it's the second hour, that this is very timely, in that we are rolling out our critical aggression prevention system program for security professionals. The ability to actually get out in front of violence and prevent it from occurring. Which we, of course, have been talking about during the first hour. This Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, we are going to be conducting a CAPS webinar where we'll go into all the details of it, explain how and why it all works, and what our hope and objectives are of working out partnerships with security professionals. And if you're interested in that, just email me at johnburns@aggressionmanagement.com or go to my LinkedIn page at John D. Burns and send me a message, and we will send you the links and how to log on. So
Yep.
I look forward to the opportunity to share this with all of your audience.
Now, that Burns is spelled Byrnes, right?
That is true. It's the Irish spelling of Burns, yes.
Right.
All right, very good. And also log into the website now while you're listening in, aggressionmanagement.com, and there's also a /aggressionmanagement.com, AGGRESSION management.com /movie, which has a very good few-minute movie on how what we're talking about. It just kind of brings it all together.
Absolutely. It's a little 3-minute movie, and if you go to the website, you'll see the little movie for a button, or you just put /movie, as you point out, and you'll get to see it. It's only 3 minutes long, but it says in a very short period of time what and how this works. So we'd be interested in having you see that.
So I'm going to review our last show very quickly, and I'm going to give everybody what I like to call the mom version. Because I have to break this down for my mother to understand. Not that my mother raised any dumb children. She didn't. She raised 7 smart ones. But this is above her head because she's not in security. But she knows this stuff intuitively, as we talked about before. So we have aggression.
Yes.
And we're going to break aggression with your system, which is a little different than other systems. We're breaking it into 2 types of aggression. Primal, which is, I'm really pissed off emotionally, and I just got to act out on that. And cognitive, which is, you have intellectually enraged me, and I'm going to get you. Is that a good way to describe it?
It's pretty close.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of what we're talking about. 2 different types of aggression. More emotional, rage, uncontrollable, and cognitive, thought out, committed. I like to call it believers. True believers would be cognitive, right? Believe in the cause. And I can kill myself and sacrifice myself as a terrorist and leave my family because I believe what I'm talking about. And those are the more dangerous types of people. So you have kind of done a lot of groundbreaking work in this area and come up with 9 stages of aggression.
Right.
And we start with the lowest stages, and as we get above stage 6 and 7, 8, 9.
Any good building is built on a good foundation. You're absolutely right.
Right. So we're going to talk about today in this show is I really kind of want to go through. This is a little, academic, but I'd like to go through chronologically each stage and define for our listeners. When you see a stage 1, let's understand that stage 1 is a form of aggression. And at that point, if you could recognize stage 1 as a security individual, as a spouse, as a neighbor, you should and ought to do something about it. Maybe it's minor. Maybe it's sending an email to somebody. But I'll let you explain it better than I did. But let's kind of go through 1 to 9 on this segment and do it.
I think the key is that as a security, from a security person, professional's perspective, whether you're corporate security or what, too often a lot of this aggressive behavior is actually below the radar. We had a situation here in Central Florida where a young at the University of Central Florida, where a student went completely unseen. Again, university campuses are the most sophisticated networks to identify a potential shooter. But
that's true.
Here's the problem.
And they miss them.
If you're on a campus, and this is even more exacerbated in other types of workplaces, etc., but if you don't do something that is misconduct, you do not fall under that category. They throw out these nets. And if you do something that's misconduct, you can be picked up by that net. If you do something that is considered aberrant or mental illness, it's strange but not threatening, you're picked up by that net. Or if you do something that's outright illegal on campus, you're picked up by campus police. Well, if you do none of those things, you are completely under the radar.
Well, and if you fall into one of those
how
nets...
How do we start to identify these people?
If you fall into
we've already said to you, it is not instinctual for one human to attack another. You have to disconnect, depersonalize, turn this person into an object. So one of the things that we're looking for is a disconnection. Someone who is normally connected is now disconnected. Now, these are, at the lower levels, are very subtle things.
All right, let's talk about stage 1. Let's give us some examples of a stage 1 primal aggressor.
But to do so, we need to start out by the trigger phase, which is the lowest level.
Okay, let's do that.
Triggers are little explosions that go off in our heads. We get up late. We go in for coffee and breakfast. There is none. We now get get halfway down the driveway when we realize it's garbage day. We forgot the garbage. Jam on the brakes, grab the garbage cans, pull them to the bottom of the street. Now we get into traffic. These are all little explosions that go off in our heads.
Okay.
The difference is we cope.
Right.
When a person stops coping, when one trigger begins to accumulate on the next, we enter into the escalation phase and what we call mounting anxiety, because this mounting anxiety changes our body language, our behavior, the way we communicate. So the trigger phase, every venue, as a security professional, whether you're on a campus, in a workplace, in an office, in executive security where you're protecting an executive, regardless of your profession, every venue has an expected behavior. Now we're looking for a baseline. Now we're looking for aggressive deviations that represent someone disconnecting, or we talked about earlier, planting the seed of distrust.
Okay, John, hold on one second.
Things.
It's hard for me to have you hear me sometimes because of the connection, but I want to jump into this trigger phase real quick. So you made a really good statement about having a baseline in a venue. So let's just, you and I understand that language, but let's break that down for my sister in Lake Tahoe. Okay.
Absolutely.
So if she's at
be on campus and there could be a concert going on and there's a mosh pit.
Right.
Where people are being thrown around, pushed around, but as long as everybody is coping, it is part of the parameters of acceptable behavior. People are pushing and shoving, but no one is getting red-faced, no one's getting overly aggressive, then this is considered baseline. But when you start seeing someone getting angry, getting upset by it, they're getting too aggressive with others, then it's going out of the parameters of expected behavior, and now you're into the escalation phase.
So the first issue is that you've got to know what the baseline is.
Situational
for the
awareness.
Environment that you're in.
Yeah, your environment drives
situational awareness is absolutely essential, no question. But here's something even more basic. You've got someone who's normally pragmatic, methodical. This is someone who's got their, quote, act together. Today they come to work, and they're scattered and disjointed. Subtle stuff, but why are they scattered and disjointed? Because they're not coping with something.
Right. Something's pushed them.
We recommend that you go to this person in a genuine and caring way. That's critical. In a genuine and caring way, and you say to this person, "You look a little scattered today. Tell me about it." And you shut up.
You should do that to me when I come into work next week.
Yeah, but you've always been
I always
scattered.
look like that when I come in here. You should really do that to me.
No, you've always been like
I may have something going on.
Yes.
I'm defining myself here. I wasn't sure. Look, I fall in all these phases. Good heavens. It's stressful doing a radio show.
Well,
half kidding though,
look.
John. It makes sense because if you're in a mosh pit, violence is what's going on, kind of. So that's normal.
Yeah.
The question is, what's not normal? A guy in a mosh pit standing there doing nothing is not normal, right?
Yes.
Whereas a guy that's violent in a mosh pit is normal. So it's very interesting that we're defining the trigger phase as situational awareness for where you are and what you're doing right at that second. I think one thing people fall into trouble with is when they're in a situation, they define the behavior they're looking at as being not serious. He doesn't mean it. Yeah, I know he looks like he's a little mad, but why would he want to do that to people? Because my neighbors at home don't act that way. Well, you're not at home with your neighbors. You're in a different environment where this guy's acting out, and you got to say, hey, wait a minute, let me get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
All right, John, good point. So, so we got the trigger phase. Somebody's not coping.
So trigger phase, and then your stage one is scattered and disjointed thinking. Now, what's happening? Remember, the primal aggressor is driven more by loss of control.
Okay.
So this is a person who's losing control to some degree. Subtle now, very subtle, but they are not coping with something, and because of it, they're scattered and disjointed. And the earlier we identify, this is critical, the earlier we identify the emergence of this aggression, the easier it is for us to diffuse this person.
So the primal guy is, would agitated be a good word? Not normally agitated. Today he's agitated.
Yes, absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
let's go over
but
to
we
the...
identified other ways as well. The deterioration of fine motor skills.
Well, that's number two. I want to stick with number one first. Let's get number one out of the way. So we got number one.
Right.
We got number one for the primal guy. Number one for the cognitive guy is a little different. And I get this kind of guy because I have a lot of employees like this, right? Okay. Hardens their point of view, begins deception, creates distance, lacks empathy. I mean, that's my guard who says, this is for you and this is for your horse you rode in on. I'm not going to do what you told me to do. I never define that as aggression. I define that as a bad employee, and I got to get rid of him. But it is aggression. It's very interesting. Why would you tell the boss to piss off?
What's more, instead of getting rid of him, find out the basis of it, and you might be able to diffuse this kind of behavior and make him a productive member of your team.
So cognitive guy, the emotional guy, I think is easier to recognize. The cognitive guy maybe becomes argumentative. How come you're late for work? He starts deceiving you about his whereabouts, creates distance.
Yep.
He doesn't want to talk to you, and so he's trying to stay away from you.
He's always talking about things in the negative. He never says anything positive about anybody. As I said, he's argumentative. He enjoys the argument more than the reason for the argument.
Let me ask you a question about if we're going from trigger to stage one. Let's say the cognitive guy, the thinking guy, gets stressors and he goes off, and now he's going into stage one. Am I recognizing him because his behavior changed to me, who knows his behavior, or Paul, who does not know his behavior, needs to recognize this behavior individually as a problem?
Well, you will both see this behavior.
Right.
That's the beauty of this program. Now, you will see, Chuck, that you will know immediately that this has changed behavior, and
Correct.
yes, you'll engage this person more effectively, but Paul will see this behavior and say this is inappropriate and ask you whether this has changed behavior or is this the way this guy is typically.
Okay, so if Paul made the mistake of assuming this is the way the guy was and he's not my employee, I'm not going to worry about it, there's a phase where something could be missed. And what you're saying is we got to look at this sort of thing as not a normal, balanced, mentally stable person, isn't pissed off at everybody, isn't deceptive, doesn't lacks empathy. That's not a normal behavior. We need to define that as
It's
something
not,
to look at.
it is not a normal, constructive, genuine kind of relationship. No. And look at the word deception here for a moment. If I'm going to aggress against you, and therefore I am disconnecting from you. These are very subtle and initial things, but I am disconnecting from you. I don't want you to know that I'm disconnecting. So what am I going to do? I'm going to deceive you. So if someone is saying something to you that just isn't adding up, then you may need to ask more questions.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Now,
Again, very subtle.
Very subtle.
But you're starting the path to a violent attack. This is stage one of a potential violent attack. And you're getting out in front, and the earlier you get out in front, the easier it is to defuse this person.
John,
turn them around and make them a production member of your team.
From a timeline point of view, on the cognitive, from trigger to stage one, is there a particular timeline, or could it be forever?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Repeat that, please.
We should probably discuss it after the break.
Yeah, we got a break coming up.
Yeah.
So, John, stand by for our break. We'll get back to you with that question from Paul. Back in a minute on Security Guy Radio.
Good. All right.
Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach.
Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on. Forget it.
If you don't know now,
If you don't know,
never will.
no, you never will know where we are. We're just out
You
there.
can't find us.
Just Google Chuck Harold, Google Paul Bristol, Google Security Guy Radio. You'll find us all over the web. But go like our Facebook pages and like and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, back with Mr. John Byrnes, founder CEO of the Center for Aggression Management. We are talking about his very comprehensive Primal and Cognitive Aggression Continua. And by the way, John, why isn't it a continuum? Just curious.
Isn't that
Well,
a
because there are two
Phil?
continuum here, and the plural of two of one continuum is a continua.
Very good.
So it is a
learned
primal
something.
and cognitive aggression continuum because there are two continuums.
Excellent.
I'd actually like to say I knew that, but
I did. Well, I knew he was right. I just wanted to know why he was right.
Well, he's British. Of course he would know it, right, Paul?
That's right.
yeah, it's just
Look, I
something.
also want
Indubitably.
to point out that this primal and cognitive aggression continua is our basic model. We have developed this now into much more detail, and it has evolved into the meter of emerging aggression software service.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that, as we mentioned before, the certified aggression manager can turn to the software, and they're going to see these elements broken into 8 different categories of behavior, body language, behavior, communication, interaction, demeanor, facial expressions, tactical movement, tactical clothing, and tactical articles. So what we're going into in some depth is still quite basic, and we have a little bit more sophisticated model that really is able to get out in front of aggressive behavior and prevent it from occurring.
Yeah, I want to talk about that software in the last segment, but I want to define 1 through 8 here for our listeners, because here's my beef with software. And by the way, we used, for example, Gavin Becker has a Mosaic, right? Very good program.
Sure.
Not like yours, John. I know yours is much more comprehensive. The problem with the software was, what I found happened was we'd sit down and interview somebody, and when we said, did they take drugs? I don't think so, probably. Well, how do you mark that? I don't think so, probably. I mean, it's so subjective when the person's answering.
Well, that's it, precisely. That's why what we've used, and that's one of the biggest problems today, that's why we're using objective observables. You see, when we created this primal and cognitive aggression, all of that body language and behavior fell into place and became empirical, objective.
Yeah, and that's
the
important.
way we've illustrated it.
Well, and that's why I like going through these phases with everybody, because they really can sit here, and an average security guard or security executive at the top level can say, Yeah, I get it. I get when my guard is a smart ass and he's not talking to me and he lacks empathy, and I get that this guy's scatterbrained today. Those are like you say, those are objective things. All right, so we finished with stage
and you
one.
may do what we call that judicious interview, Chuck, and determine that there's a problem you have to address, or you may determine that there's a valid reason for someone to have this behavior, and you let them go about their way. But either way, you're engaging them now at the earliest possible moment, and the easiest point it is to engage them effectively and prevent it, turn this thing around.
Right, the safest phase, frankly, at the bottom of the scale.
John, I would
Absolutely.
like to step back to the question before the break. Is there any sort of timeline between these stages? So the trigger phase, could you be talking to somebody, and as you're talking to them, they move into the stage one? Or is this especially
absolutely?
On the
They can occur right before you, or they can occur over an extended period of time, Paul. Either way, this is not geared to a particular timeline. It's based upon the individual and the process they're going through. What this is, the objective here is to give you the signs so that you can conduct the judicious interview, identifying whether this in fact is a person who's aggressing, and take appropriate action so as to start turning this around and diffuse it.
Okay, let's talk about stage two. So we've got a lot of stages to get through, and I want to run short on this. So stage two for a primal aggressor is defined as deterioration of fine motor skills. Give me an example of that. Give me an example of that.
Well, I mean, fine motor skills is your ability to write. And if you're fighting someone who's having real difficulty writing, and they break their pencil and all of these kinds of things, you can see that they're physically agitated. Likewise, gentlemen, what I like to do is if I see someone who is becoming anxious, what I will say to them, or tearing up, I will say to them, here's a yellow pad. I would like you and your issues are very important to me. I'd like you to sit down and write out every detail. Don't miss a single detail. Because the act of writing, structuring sentences, is a very analytical left brain function, and it brings you right from the right brain emotion to that left brain analytical, and it literally makes someone, it starts to bring someone down this continuum as opposed to taking them up.
Very interesting.
Reversing the
Interesting. And if they don't come down, you got a problem. You know you have a problem.
Well, then you've got to mitigate. Yes, absolutely. But our objective is to be able to engage in a way that if we can identify them early enough to turn this around before they even realize that they're aggressing. Because, we talked about planting the seed of distrust. The vast majority of people don't even realize they're being aggressive.
So stage two for a cognitive chooses a side and fixates on one point of view and loses trust of others. Well, I've seen this a dozen times with employees.
Well, and understand what we're looking at, that disconnect, remember. Subtle yet. This is stage two, subtle yet, but what are we looking for? We're looking for disconnections. So from your perspective, Chuck, you know this person and you can see a distinct difference. This was a person who was cooperative. They were part of the team, but now they're sort of starting to act on their own. They're starting to not care. So you're seeing the changes. Paul, on the other hand, walks in for the first time and sees this behavior and says, this isn't good behavior, and asks you about it. And you confers with you that this is changed behavior, and the two of you start to engage to diffuse this person.
This choose a side is interesting to me because I've always, myself, I'm registered independent politically, right? So I can come down on either side of an issue, and I can look at both sides, and I can argue both sides. But you see in the political arena, especially today, people on the far left or far right are
it's
just
amazing.
Absolutely venomous about the other side, right? So my question is, really, how can you hate the other side so badly? Because the fact that they exist allows your point of view to exist. Otherwise, you'd have no point of view. And I don't get that part. But when you define it this way, those extremes are very
a lot of sense.
Very aggressive. Yeah. Very aggressive, those people.
Absolutely.
If you're not going to see someone else's point of view.
Look, if you cannot have an earnest, level-headed conversation with someone and meet someone on, if you will, the field of logic and reason and rationale, what happens today? They start to besmirch your character. Why? because they're trying to undermine your relationship with your community, what I call your community, but those people you have sway with.
Yeah, and a stage.
So they're going to change those people and move them away from you. How? By turning them against you. And how are they going to do that? By doing things that undermine their trust relationship with you.
Well, in stage 2, it's interesting if you
outright
watch
overt aggression at the fourth level.
If you watch political talk shows, right? A lot of times the arguments are
Absolutely.
not arguments as you and I grew up
regardless
hearing.
of your side of this equation. It is political talk shows. It is every single media outlet, regardless of who you're watching. Every one of them sways the information based upon that, and if they're particularly biased, then they'll try to besmirch your character so as to undermine your trust relationship with your community, turning you at the fourth level of cognitive aggression.
Yeah, they don't have a discussion with you. They just put your side down.
You know, that's a good point.
Absolutely.
I mean, is there a connection between increased aggressive behaviour and what's going on in the in the media at the moment?
I think so.
Because there's so much aggression. When you look at it like this,
there's no discussion in the media. There's no discussion. There's all aggression.
Paul.
Yeah. All right, let's get into stage 3.
Our country has become so polarized. That's the term used for it.
Right.
That it is very difficult. I mean, I can say the most, if I'm on one side of an argument and you're on the other, I can say the most brilliant thing that would normally go down in history as the very best thing anybody could possibly have said, but if you have absolutely no trust in what I'm saying, then I'll have absolutely no meaning for you.
Yeah.
Right. That's the problem. It's very well defined by looking at these stages. Very interesting. All right, stage 3. It's about stage 3 on a primal aggressor. They're hypervigilant and they question authority. Hypervigilant and question authority. I would fall into stage 3 quite a bit myself.
Communication indicators come into play. If you're a supervisor and you want me to do something and I respond to you, who are you to tell me I need to do this? Then I'm questioning your authority, and that's the beginning of verbal description of aggressive behavior.
Now, what do we mean by hypervigilant?
Vigilance is the keeping of eyes on someone. Hypervigilant is a hyper way. Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, does a beautiful job. He talks about going into a theater, and he said, if I throw a poisonous snake in the front row, the first third will go immediately into hypervigilance. The second third will go The third third will go out and sell tickets to people to come watch the first third. He said, but if I come into that theater and I start shooting people, every person in that theater will immediately go into hypervigilance. Because human-on-human aggression produces that kind of response.
Right.
That's hypervigilance. But this is at the minor stages of hypervigilance. You're starting to see it. You're starting to respond to it.
All right. So on stage 3 for the cognitive aggressor, stage 3 would be abandons communication as a tool. So do they stop talking? Is that kind of stop responding to emails and things?
That's it precisely. Instead of if we have a mutual relationship, a teamwork, a leadership, a loyalty type of relationship, we're going to communicate about what our objectives are and come to a common end in a cooperative way. If I'm at the third stage, one of the indicators that I'm at the third stage is that I no longer have to communicate. My actions will speak for themselves.
Oh, interesting. John, hold that thought. We got another commercial to take. Back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguy.radio.com.
Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach.
Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguy.radio.com. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, and Instagram for all your social media needs. Yes, that's very good. Oh, welcome back, John. We're talking with John Byrnes, the founder and CEO of Center for Aggression Management. We're talking about his primal and cognitive aggression Continua and how we can identify aggression at a very, very early stage. In fact, we're basically redefining what aggression is into some surprising categories, I think. So we left off at stage 3, and we're going into stage 4 now.
I got a quick
Oh, yeah, go
question
ahead.
on stage 3 here, on the cognitive. From a domestic violence standpoint, John, I mean, it's stage 3.
Which is abandoned communication.
Abandoned
as a tool.
communication. Would you say that runs into the domestic violence side as well?
Oh, it ranges in all aggressive behavior, whether it's domestic aggression or whether it's corporate aggression. Person not working with you as a team. The key that I think the point you're making, Paul, is this is a continuum. What could start out today by disconnection could be an assaultive behavior in the future. And this is why people start to engage where prior to this they wouldn't. Again, humans tend to do what they believe as in their best interest. If once they learn about this continuum and they realize that stages 1 and 2, as subtle as they may be, 3 can turn out to be 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, and before you know it, you have an assaultive behavior.
Let me ask you a question about the stage 3 and the abandonment of communication. So from in a social setting, and let's use social media, right? I've been involved in, let's say Facebook or LinkedIn things where, I don't know, you're talking to somebody, something's okay, and then all of a sudden you're not getting a reply from that. You're not getting an invite. You're uninvited. Do these people know that that's an aggressive act, or they just don't care? Because from my perspective, if somebody, what's that thing they call on LinkedIn? Open network.
Defriend. Oh, yeah.
Like there's an open network on LinkedIn, and then you can write somebody, and they don't bother to reply to you. At least a courtesy of "I'm sorry, I'm not interested" is a proper business response. But to not respond, is that considered aggressive on their side, or they just don't care?
Well, remember again, stage 3 is still quite subtle, and often is not seen because we've already talked to you about planting the seed of distrust in the 4th stage, and people don't even realize that that's being aggressive.
Okay.
So, stage 3 can be subtle in such a way that they don't even realize that that's aggressive behavior, or using the judicious interview, you identify that really they weren't being aggressive against you. They weren't doing it because they didn't want to do it, but they were distracted by some other thing in it, which is fully acceptable to you.
Oh, it's interesting.
So that's why we have the judicious interview, because not always is body language and behavior accurate.
So I have a really big family, like really big, like 14 brothers and sisters, right? And I got like 32 nieces and nephews or something. So one of my very young nieces gets in a tizzy one day, and she unfriends, unlikes, everybody's, right? Just disconnects from everybody's social media. And we all went, oh, what's going on there? And I dismissed it as a 12-year-old's angst, but maybe I should look deeper into it.
Well, I think when something's different, I mean, you're talking about on LinkedIn and emails if you don't get a reply, but that's that just may be that they
maybe
don't
something
know the
else, right?
or they just don't know the etiquette.
But here's a connected member of the family.
If something changes, that's the issue.
She's connected, she's engaged, and one day she unplugs everybody, and I couldn't get my sister to deal with that. I said, I think you got to look at that. That's not normal for her to unplug.
The judicious interview at the lower levels can be something as simple as, I love the word intent, because intent takes them right to the core of their motivation. So a judicious interview at these lower levels might be something as simple as, help me understand the intent behind your disconnecting.
I love that language. Isn't that great language? It puts them on the spot. They can't get out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it, as you said, tends to take them right to the core of their motivation, and it's a way for us to identify. They may come back and say, no, Uncle Chuck, I meant to say I disconnected because of X, Y, and Z, and that's acceptable.
Right.
But I will tell you that when a person disconnects through social media, like you just described, it is often an indication of something much, much more. And that is why someone ought to engage that person with that judicious interview.
Did you hear that,
help me
niece?
understand the intent behind you disconnecting from everyone.
My sister listens, so maybe she'll take that advice. All right. Well, I just brought it up because it's kind of a real-world example, right? It's social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the term social.
It took you off a wall.
Took me off the wall and everything. Yeah. All right, stage 4. So stage 4 for a primal aggressor, the behavior indicated would be the aggressor refuses to comply and depersonalizes the victim. So this is kind of bullying, right? In a way, depersonalizes the victim.
Absolutely. But bullying tends to be, I mean, yes, remember we talked about verbal, first of all, they question your authority. The next level, as we're seeing here in this fourth stage, is they're refusing to comply. Now, this might also be the lower levels of a use of force matrix, from a law enforcement
Well, that's true.
perspective.
That's right. That would be the bottom phase. Yep.
But let's remember also, stages 1, 2, and 3 are pre-conflict, prior to conflict. Remember, we said that conflict resolution is not satisfactory. It falls short of our expectation because people tend to express their conflict with violence. If you truly want to prevent violence, you have to get out in front of conflict. So conflict is at stage 4
Okay.
in cognitive aggression.
I totally recognize this
So
as a police officer
now
because
you can start to get out in front of it and actually prevent it from occurring because you now know what stages 1, 2, and 3 looks like. Likewise, bullying presupposes someone exhibiting bullying behavior. Stage 4 represents the beginning of bullying.
yeah,
It's an active aggression against another person.
if I stop somebody in a police officer situation, and I say, "Hey, may I see your driver's license?" in a very polite, calm way, and they go sideways, being aggressive about not complying with that, I know I have an immediate problem because I was not
Yes.
being aggressive.
Yes.
I was just doing my business. Everything's routine. And so that's very interesting to recognize that as aggression at that phase because it really is. All right, so let's jump over. I don't want to run out of time and get short of our numbers here. So stage 4 for the cognitive aggressor would be secretly creates distrust of their victim within their community. And it's kind
That's
of
that planting
sniper
the
behavior.
seed of distrust.
Yeah, this is
And
fabulous.
sniper behavior, yes.
This happens in all corporations I've been around.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They try
Absolutely.
to take
And it's outright overt aggression at the 4th level. It happens so often because people don't even realize that this is aggressive behavior.
Right.
The key to remember is once they learn this, they tend to move away from this behavior because no one wants to be outright overt aggressive.
You think the people engaged in the behavior move away from it? Is that what you're saying? It's because
What I'm
it's not
saying
subtle?
is that because it is not instinctual for one human to attack another, you have to disconnect, depersonalize, turn them into an object. Humans typically will move away from what they perceive as aggressive behavior.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
Oh, okay. All right.
Once this is defined as aggressive behavior, there's a natural propensity for them to move away from this behavior. If they don't, all you have to do is point to this chart, and because of that, now you're bringing peer pressure to bear. They tend to move away. Only the most ardent aggressors will continue using that behavior, and those individuals you may have to mitigate.
Very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, because if they're outed and it's defined as not acceptable in the corporate environment, they change. Because I got to tell you, that stage 4 is that's common practice. That's just it. All right, stage 5. We're going to jump back over to the primal aggressor in stage 5. This is where someone will exhibit belligerence, yelling, sweating, unusual swearing. I seem to be in stage 5 quite a bit recently. I dropped the F-bomb a little more than I should.
Remember, again, this is changed behavior.
Yeah.
If someone is belligerent on a normal basis, then you have to have a conversation with them, and that's part of what we teach as well. How do you effectively, and part of it is, what are the skill sets you should apply at what level, because we want to use the corresponding levels. We don't want to use a sledgehammer when a tapping hammer will do.
Right. So stage 5 for a cognitive aggressor deliberately damages the reputation of another by exposing them publicly as an enemy.
Now, how is this separate from stage 4?
Very good question, Paul. This is a progression, remember? So what I'm doing in stage 4 is I'm turning your community against you by causing them to trust you less or to distrust you. Now that I have built this distrust between you and your community, I'm going to go to the next level and actually proclaim you as an enemy of your own community.
Post something on Facebook that's derogatory.
Well, it sounds like a general election.
Yeah, that's true. It does.
Yes, well, absolutely. You're 100% on both counts. This is the evolution, the progression, the escalation of cognitive aggression.
You know, you have a good point. You could apply every one of these stages
Oh yeah.
to a politician
Politics.
and politics.
Absolutely.
Well, it's actually a good way for people to view this.
It's human-based aggression, whether it's one person against another, whether it's one group against another, or whether it is one culture against another. We're seeing this play out right now. It also, whether it's political.
Yeah,
We're seeing the huge topic of us and them.
Well, it is us. Yes, it is
Yeah.
us and them on,
Yeah.
on the media, and I think society is not the better for it. And
No.
I think what's going to happen is something's going to give. Something's going to bust loose. Something's going to happen because if you look at this, you're
Chuck,
escalating.
our hope is that when people realize that this behavior is outright overt aggression at the fourth level, number one, the vast majority of people will begin to move away from this behavior because it is natural to do so, that those that don't now will know a way to mitigate it because we have a definition that we can better work with.
Interesting.
Well, we may have started something here
Yeah.
on Security Guy Radio. We may have started a revolution.
And incidentally, I want to point out also one thing that we're finding across the country is particularly valuable. Because we're not using mental illness or mental disorder in any way, this is purely aggressive behavior, judging it on its merits, we fall outside of HIPAA regulations.
Oh, excellent point.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly valuable in colleges and universities and in hospitals.
John, hold that thought. I want to come back to that because that's an excellent
Okay.
point on how this works. Back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguy.com.
Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach. Security breach.
Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguy.com with Chuck Harold, Paul Bristow, and our special guest, John Byrnes, the founder and CEO of the Center for Aggression Management. We're talking about his primal and cognitive aggression continua. And we were at stage. What did we leave off at? Stage 5?
Well, I think we started talking about politics and the fact that this really can be used for the current political situation.
It absolutely is. It's politics. Yeah, I mean, if
It
you look
really
at,
is, isn't it?
It really is.
It
It's
really
very
is.
interesting, and,
Yeah.
and this really shows that this may be an indicator that our society is aggressive in general.
Yeah,
well, you know
yeah,
that, but I mean, this
yeah.
kind of,
Well, and the destruction that it causes as well.
oh, it's
You
terrible.
know, and you're seeing that just
Smearing
just through what's
people and
happening.
making rumors and
Yeah,
lying
and
about
the fact
stuff.
that nobody can make a decision anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So we left off with stage 5, which on the primal side is belligerent, yelling, sweating, unusual swearing. And on the cognitive side is deliberately damages reputation of another by exposing them publicly as an enemy. It's just like, throwing down the gauntlet,
Yeah.
line in the sand, say, hey,
Yeah.
that's it, pal, Mr. Michael, we having a technical difficulty there? We lost John? Do we lose him? Do we have him on the line? All right, we have a little technical difficulty.
Oh,
All right, let's go to stage 6 without John because I want to keep
Yeah.
this going, make sure we get these points in. All right. So stage 6 for a primal aggressor perceives himself as a victim, demonstrates intimidations and threats. So to me, this would be like, you know what? You're picking on me, and I'm going to push back.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Which is a thing that you always see, right?
Always see
I mean,
it.
that-
Oh, yeah. If
that
anybody
really
attacks
is-
you, you attack back.
And
It's
I actually
defensive.
think that's what most people recognise, that stage 6. That seems to stick out.
That's
You know,
a non-subtle level.
yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
like he was saying, at stage 4, it starts going up into...
Yeah,
into
because
nine.
you got, I mean, stage 5, the belligerent swearing and all the rest of it.
Who doesn't
you
swear?
see a lot of people do that. I never swear.
Well, you don't actually swear.
No, I
No,
do
but
actually.
Well, but you say British terms that I don't
Well,
recognize.
yeah, that's right. British swearing.
All right, and then stage 6 for the cognitive aggressor is he issues ultimatums and proclaims the victim as evil.
I think it's the ultimatums, isn't it, that stick out, especially in the domestic side.
I
when you
gotta
look at the
say,
domestic stuff.
I recognize a couple of things in my behavior.
Yeah.
Some of these, I gotta say. Well, it's true if you're saying, hey, we're doing it this way, or that's it, or else, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't define that as aggressive, but he's right, because what's the line between that being aggressive and assertive?
Yeah.
So if you issue an ultimatum in business, like fix that or I'm going to fire you.
Or a red line.
Or red line. I think people would, or what? A red line.
A red line. A red line in the sand.
You're mixing your metaphors. No red line. There's just a line in the sand. There's not a color to it.
Oh, that's right. Where did the red line come from? Must have been the thin red line or something. Or was that
Okay, it's the
blue
thin
line?
blue line. All right, stop dangling your participles, right? Okay, so stage 6, if we're going to issue an ultimatum as a cognitive aggressor, we would say that again, is more recognizable also in the stage 6 of, proclaiming yourself as a self-victim and things like that. John, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there you go.
This continuum is so good, we can do it without you.
We've just taught it
I love
ourselves.
Glad you're back. Well, listen, I want to get through these other phases. We finished stage 6 because we're out at 8:05, and I want you to get into your program. So let's get through these, and then we'll talk more about your seminars coming up, right? So stage.
Well, we've talked to some degree on the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and I think the key here is that humans do not want to get into fistfights with other humans typically. What are they actually trying to do? They're trying to intimidate this victim into submission. That's actually what we're observing here.
And 7 is where it
And
really
it's
escalates.
not working.
7 escalates into, I got a problem. I got to do something.
Yeah. And it's just before an attack itself. I'm completely complicit with the 8th and 9th level. I want certain people to be injured by this, die by this, but I'm not going to actually kill the people or put myself that much at risk. I'm going to inspire other people to do, or I'm going to assist other people to do it like an accomplice.
Right. So stage 7 for a primal aggressor, he loses verbal control and words generally do not make sense. I can understand that part.
Yes.
For a cognitive, the conflict.
They're complicit.
Oh, complicit. I can't read
with
that.
the conspiracy. Yes, they're
Yeah.
complicit. They're completely complicit. They want certain people to be injured or to die by this plan, by this cause, and they're going to aid in that process. We hear about school shooters having someone else bring a camera to school to take pictures.
Right. They want
That
to.
sort of thing.
All right. Interesting. All right. Stage 8 for a primal. There's a complete loss of judgment. Actions and words usually fail to make sense. I
Right.
can see that part. I've been at a point where I've
Loss
been
of verbal control.
I've
Yep.
been angry. I'm Irish, okay? I fall back on that. My temper's 5 seconds long, but it's a big one, right? And
Right.
I say, what did I do that for? I really go back and say,
Yeah.
I can't believe I did that, because you do look. But at the time that you're in that phase, you think it's logical. You think it makes perfectly good sense what you're doing. So that's an interesting one. But I don't think I've ever moved into cognitive, which would be plans to attack the victim. Well, I have not. Plans to attack the victim without self-sacrifice. So I just get pissed off and blow steam and everybody thinks I'm wacky, but I don't turn around and say, now I'm going to try and kill you.
You know what's interesting, John, looking at this? I mean, I'd never really put domestic violence, terrorism, that type of thing into the same packet.
But it is.
But it is. When
Yeah.
you look at this,
All
you
interchangeable.
suddenly realise that, you're
It's the same behavior with a different title.
yeah, and you've got that cause, which is, I think, you got the cause of whatever it may be in the domestic violence side, and then the terrorism side, and then the score. It's all the same, right?
Yeah. You can change it. So stage 9, we're going to end with that. Then we're going to get into how we can get some more information out of you. Stage 9, the primal guy, he panics, he becomes enraged, exhibits body language of an attacker.
Well, this is the guy spiraling out of control into panic and or rage.
He's all puffed up. He's puffing his chest up. He's yelling. He's getting big, making himself
Yep.
big. So he's
this
not attacked.
person is completely lost control. Yes.
Right. Breaking stuff, probably. He's busting up the house. He's
Yep.
busting out the back window of the police car, that kind of stuff. Again,
Yep.
from my perspective, or Paul's law enforcement perspective, this is an easy guy to deal with. He's a painful guy to deal with. You're going to go to the hospital. You're going to have a lot of paperwork. But it's something clearly defined, and there are clear parameters for me to respond to that as a police officer, as a spouse, as a sibling. That's stick time, right? It's hitting you in the head with a lamp, and we're done. We're not going to do this. You try and talk them down, but you'd be justified in responding to control that. It's the cognitive guy that's the scary guy.
John, we've lost you.
John, we lost you there for a second. Come on back.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
that fact is that security and law enforcement often see the guy on the right, this red-faced, slow guy, as their aggressor. They do not see the guy on the left, who is far more lethal.
Yeah, John, we're going to have to turn you down for a second. We lost you one more second. But what John was saying is that on the right-hand side, people see that guy as the aggressor. He's obvious, he's out there, he's apparent, and law enforcement says that's your aggressive guy. And they fail to see, and I would say they failed to see this from basic law enforcement, intelligence, whatever. The guy on the left, stage 9, is willing to do whatever it takes, including taking their own life or the lives of others, in a murder, suicide, or terrorism act, because they're committed. They believe in their cause, right?
Now, just for the audience, when we talk about the guy on the left,
we've
got a picture of a guy with a mad stare, and on the
Well, not
on
mad.
the right,
He's calm. Just a
calm
blank.
stare, and on the right we've got somebody who looks like Chuck screaming and shouting.
Yes, it does look like Max.
It does. It's got the same hairstyle.
So the cognitive aggressor in stage 9, where they're actually engaged in acting, this is the guy that's got the 100-yard stare, 1,000-yard stare. He's calm. He's collected. He's committed. He is, as John said earlier, lost animation. He's not all puffed up and yelling and screaming like the primal aggressor, because he said, well, no reason to get all excited because I've already determined I'm going to go kill everybody, probably get killed myself, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And that's the scary guy. That's the guy I got to watch for,
yeah.
you know. So this is really fascinating. John, you still there?
Yes, I am.
All right,
There you
good.
go.
Sorry about this connection. Maybe we'll do another show in a couple months and kind of come back on some of this. I think we heard most of what you said, but sometimes it really dropped out. All right, so we got about 2 or 3 minutes. Go for it. Tell me give us your website. How can we get a hold of all that good stuff?
Once again, yes, go to our website, find my email address, go to LinkedIn, find us there, send us a message. If you have an interest in learning more about this, we have an interest in developing partnerships with security professionals, long-term relationships, and training them to train others so we can expand this knowledge out into the community. And we're going to have our webinar this Thursday, the 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in attending that, it's a free webinar. Join us. Send me an email saying you have an interest. We'll put you on the list and send you the information you need to log on.
Well,
Right, so-
for one person, I will be on it.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity to share this.
Yeah, it's been great. Visit John's website. That's aggressionmanagement.com, AGGRESSION management.com, or aggressivemanagement.com/movie for a little brief synopsis of this fascinating show, John.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. It's very, very good, comprehensive, easy to understand, makes a lot of sense, and I hope people follow that. So follow us again.
It's been my very great pleasure, Chuck.
It's been great. All right, tune in next week for a great show on Security Guy Radio. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Google. Cheers.
Cheers.